Goeiedag, good day, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world. You know, what I find fascinating is that there are a lot of people on YouTube who claim to be experienced commentators on the news and reporting on South African affairs. Now, a lot of people don't realize my history and my track record when it comes to reporting on the news online, on the internet. And it takes you right back to 1995, the fourth quarter of 1995, when I set up, believe it or not, I was the first one in Australia to set up an online daily newspaper. And below this video in the links, you'll be able to go to the National Library of Australia's website, directly to a link where you can go and view over 5,000 web pages that I wrote, all about news in Australia. And as a result of that, starting back in 1995, in 1999, I wrote a book called Murder by Media. It was a bestseller. It was a bestseller. And it upset a lot of people in the media industry in South Africa. So much so, and if you go and have a look at Enemy of the State under the Loving Life channel, you will see the whole story. But so much so that Rupert Murdoch's News Limited went after me and used their political connections to have me arrested for exposing a pedophile, resulting in this book that I wrote back in 2000 called Enemy of the State. Now, the reason I'm talking about this is because I've been involved in the media and reporting for about half my life, and I'm 66 now. And when you get some kid who's in their 20s or 30s saying, you know, this guy knows nothing about the media, he's a new guy on the block, because my YouTube channel has only been going for about, well, I've only been reporting South African events for the last 5 years, but they've been doing it for 10 years. These are 25-year-olds. Now, when I first set up my Australian National News of the Day, back in 1995, these guys were either in nappies or hadn't even been born. So, you know, I'm just putting that message out there to people like that. Now, one of the things that got me into a whole lot of trouble, not long after I released Murder by Media, was I dared to bring out a book called One Voice, Many Issues. This is probably the least sold of my books. I've written 8 books. And I'll tell you what the chapters were in this book. And you'll understand why the media treated this book with horror, because it didn't suit their narrative. And I was seen as a racist and an extreme right-winger because I dared publish a book which covered these particular events in it. Globalization and the multilateral agreement on investment. And if you Google multilateral agreement on investment, you will see how incredibly damaging that was. Like the Great Reset that Klaus Schwab is talking about back then. And it was because Australia, back in the 1990s, said, no, we're not going to be part of this MAI, as they call the Multilateral Agreement on Investment. It never went ahead. And I had a huge role to play in that, because I was involved in the One Nation Party. The leader of the One Nation Party got up in Parliament. This is back in the 1990s, and it's all there on the record. And I actually gave her the information that she used to make a speech. This created a furor amongst the major parties who said, oh, we support the MAI completely, and regardless, they actually did an inquiry into the MAI, realized that the whole thing was cloak and daggers, wasn't right for Australians, and it was thrown out the window. As a result of my research, this is back in the late 1990s, okay? Getting back to this book, the other chapters which created fear and loathing were the FSIA running the Australian banks. Now, again, if you just Google FSIA, you will see what this is all about. It's another one of these international treaties which resulted in the Australian banks being allowed to be owned by overseas interests. Previously, pre-1995, you couldn't actually have shares in the Australian banks if you were based in the US or based in the UK, whatever. Today, all our Australian banks are foreign-owned by Wall Street, the Rothschilds. This happened in the 1990s. Previous to that, the banks were owned by the people of Australia. That's in this book, One Voice, Many Issues. Economic rationalism is in this book. The sell-off of the farm. The privatization of Telstra. Isn't it interesting? Just like the lockdown. Right around the world at exactly the same time, all the telecom nationalized companies were being privatized, they were being put onto the public forum and being sold to Wall Street. All of them, right across, including South Africa. You look at when South African telecoms were basically put out there for people to buy the shares, and you'll see it all happened at the same time, right across the world. If that's not an agenda, what is? Because the same thing happened with the banks back in the 1990s. Anyway, let's continue. Trade tariffs. Deregulation. Here are the biggies. These are the ones that got people really hot under the collar on the left-hand side because of my book, One Voice, Many Issues. Political correctness. Multiculturalism. The gay and lesbian lobby. Oh, too hot to handle. That chapter is that chapter is explosive when you understand what happens, especially amongst the gay population. It is. I'm not going to talk about it here. It's just too obscene. The Republican debate. Of course, back then they were wanting to make Australia a republic and change the Constitution because the Constitution was working too much in the favour of the Australian general population. The Australian media. Now remember, this book came out after Murder by Media, so I had a fair amount to say about that. The Aboriginal industry, known here as ATSIC. And I'm not going to discuss that further here, but let me tell you that as a result of One Nation, ATSIC was disbanded because One Nation was getting so much support from people who realized and recognized that the whole thing was a scam. Just like the ANC, it was a completely corrupt part of Australian bureaucracy. Native title and beyond. Tax and big business, the two-party system and compulsory preferential voting, and then underemployment. So that's the book that I brought out about that same time as Murder by Media. And, of course, as a result of Murder by Media, the mainstream media, led by News Limited, went after me, and as I said, if you go and watch that documentary, Enemy of the State, you'll see the whole story. But that resulted in this book. Now, I often talk about the fake news. And I just want you to understand that I do this from a position of knowing the facts. I'm not just sort of parroting what other people are saying. I have seen so much fake news pushed out by organizations like News Limited, like CNN, like Fox even, as you'll see in the videos attached here. BBC, that they're all complete and utter crap. This is why it's so important that we have the alternative media reporting as they do. And of course now you've got the big platforms like YouTube, Google, Twitter, etc., banning people when it doesn't suit their narrative. Starting to sound familiar? Just like with the mainstream fake news, something doesn't support their narrative, it doesn't appear. It's not part of the story. Now, this brings us to a point of credibility. Any reporter, and I mean any reporter who actually works for a major media organization is completely corrupted. They are just going along with what they are told to say. And you don't have to listen to it from me. I'm going to play 2 short videos in a second. And I'll explain to you what the 2 videos are about. You've got a young female reporter who worked for Fox 26 in the United States in Texas. And she had had enough with the way that stories that should have been aired were being cancelled. Yeah, cancel culture by people higher up. And in one particular example, she uses hydroxychloroquine and how that was kind of stamped on because Donald Trump had recommended it as a way of combating COVID-19. And of course, that was like bringing bees to the honey. Yeah, you know, they all came running around to put the alternative point of view to what Trump had suggested. Again, it comes back to the narrative. So the first clip you're going to see here is where this reporter, in the middle of a live report, suddenly says, I'm going to blow the whistle. Let's have a listen to that.
Outages across the region. Fox 26 reporter Ivory Hecker is live in Montgomery County to take a look at that aspect.
Thanks, guys. That's right. Before we get to that story, I want to let you, the viewers, know that Fox Corp has been muzzling me to keep certain information from you, the viewers. And from what I'm gathering, I am not the only reporter being subjected to this. I am going to be releasing some recordings about what goes on behind the scenes at Fox because it applies to you, the viewers. I found a nonprofit journalism group called Project Veritas. It's going to put that out tomorrow, so tune into them. But as for this heat wave across Texas, you can see what it's doing to AC units. This one broken down as we
now, as a result of her blowing the whistle, that very same day, she got a phone call from the editor of Fox 26, who said to her, you are suspended. Go and grab your stuff and basically piss off. We don't want to ever see you again. Because, of course, she was fired. And in the video that follows here, you will see her talking to Project Veritas about the ramifications of the way media is presented by the mainstream news organization. You know, your news that you get today is fake. It's propaganda. It's not news. The real news is done by little channels like Loving Life, where we put a completely different perspective on. But of course, we're now facing the barriers of YouTube and Google. who are so quick to pull down channels if they find that the narrative doesn't fit their blinkered agenda. This is why we have set up lovinglifetv.com, and this is why I'm suggesting to anyone who is covering South Africa, who has a YouTube channel that is concerned about how YouTube is starting to censor them, just contact me. We have already 17 contributing channels participating on our new platform. These are YouTube channels that are now coming across to lovinglifetv.com because they've had enough of YouTube censorship as well. We're going to develop the most comprehensive news platform for South African news. And I'm going back to my many, many years of experience reporting the news, and I'm going back to 1995. And that's what I've been doing. Now that's close to 30 years that I've actually been involved in research and covering the news. And when it comes to globalization and the issues we're just talking about today, that's what this book was all about. Back in 1999, 2000. That's what it was all about. It was about the New World Order. And where we're standing right now is with the Great Reset. And I put out a video just yesterday which demonstrated that to all ends and means we're already in the Great Reset, because there are two sets of values. Where those who are at the top can do what they like, but the rest of the population are now being subjected to further restrictions and curtailments of their civil liberties. This is now happening to us in real time. Here comes the second video, where you can hear this young lady talking to Project Veritas and explaining what went on at Fox 26, a typical mainstream media television station. Now remember, every single reporter on SATV, Enka, News 24, what's the other one called, Times or something like that, all these different television stations that are pushing out the same message, all their reporters are completely conflicted. They have no integrity. All they're doing is simply pushing out the message that they're told to push out. There's no independence in reporting. The only place you get that today is through alternative media online. And that's why I had to make the decision when YouTube kept on shutting down my channels because of medical misinformation regarding the COVID-19 scam. That's when I had to make the decision to set up my own platform, to be independent of this complete and utter disgraceful showing of so-called news. All right, guys, I'm going to leave it at that. Here comes the second video. Please remember to subscribe to Loving Life on YouTube to be kept informed. Please remember to register on lovinglifetv.com to be kept informed. Please remember to like this video. Please remember to share this video. And above all, please stay safe. Bye for now.
Fox came at my throat for standing up against censorship.
In my opinion, you failed as a reporter.
From the inside, yes, there's a narrative. Yes, it is unspoken, but if you accidentally step outside the narrative, if you don't sense what that narrative is and go with it, there will be grave consequences for you.
It's not just about the viewers, it's about what our CEO reads. It's about what our GM reads.
My question is very simple. Why are you doing this?
It affects the viewers. That's why I'm doing this. The viewers are being deceived by a carefully crafted narrative in some stories.
I have passed on Bitcoin stories. African American audience of 5, it's probably not going to play. That's a choice I'm making. an editorial choice.
That seems sort of a racially charged statement to make.
I want out of this narrative news telling. I want out of this corruption.
Are you afraid of doing this?
I haven't had a lot of fear about it. I'm so horrified at what the news business has stooped to.
What you just heard was our newest insider, Fox 26 reporter Ivory Hecker, blowing the whistle on her own network's bias. Hecker felt compelled to come forward and shine a light on what she says is Fox 26 being, quote, deceptive to viewers.
Fox came at my throat for standing up against censorship. Fox Corp is prioritizing corporate interests above the viewer's interests and therefore operating in a deceptive way.
I have passed on Bitcoin stories. African American audience of 5, it's probably not going to play. That's a choice I'm making, an editorial choice.
You need to cease and desist posting about hydroxychloroquine.
Not just about the viewers, it's about what our CEO reads.
You need to stand for something or fall for anything.
Ivory, what do you do at Fox 26 Houston?
I'm a reporter, dayside reporter, primarily on the 5 o'clock news, also 6 o'clock news.
And why have you chosen to come forward?
What's happening within Fox Corp is an operation of prioritizing corporate interests above the viewer's interests and therefore operating in a deceptive way. Viewers are being deceived about some of the things that are going on. From my experience, my newsroom kind of groups everyone into racial groups. You know, a lot of our meetings are about, well, how does this play to black people?
Hecker says Fox 26 suppression of news stories many times was based on their viewer demographics.
I have passed on Bitcoin stories by almost every single reporter for our 5 o'clock audience because that's not our 5 o'clock audience. So there are lots of reasons. If I know our numbers are tanking from 5 to 6, and in one particular segment, an older woman, whatever, I may say, yeah, the Bitcoin for our poor African American audience of 5, it's probably not going to play. That's a choice I'm making, an editorial choice.
What does she mean by that?
Research is done to study what sort of demographic groups watch each newscast, and it was found that, according to her, that some of our biggest audience at 5 is poor black people, and she has decided that poor black people don't care about Bitcoin.
That seems sort of a racially charged statement to make on her behalf.
She chose to kind of divert to the story of Bitcoin herself.
Hecker goes on to explain how she believes Fox 26's biases go beyond just race. It even seeps into their coverage of medicine and health in general.
We have some of those examples, including a video clip of Dr. Stella Emanuel talking about hydroxychloroquine in July of 2020.
America, you don't need to be afraid. COVID has a cure. You don't need to be afraid. COVID has prevention. If they put everybody on hydroxychloroquine right now, for those with early disease, and those that want to get prevention, I'm telling you, we'll stop COVID in its tracks in 30 days.
That story went viral July 27th. The next morning at Fox 26, someone tipped me off, this doctor's from Houston. This is our local story. And we also, everyone noticed how it was getting censored across social media platforms like we'd never seen before. We were all stunned by that. My boss Susan talked about how it did not make sense that they were censoring this. Dart brought up that.
Who's Dart?
Oh, Dart is Susan's boss, our station president. And Dart on that call, he said, look, it's obvious why this is getting censored. President Trump said that hydroxychloroquine works. He retweeted her. And whatever he does, everyone wants to do the opposite.
Who said that?
That's what Dart said. So the story aired. We talked about a recent NIH study where hydroxychloroquine was found to neither be harmful or helpful. And I added that to the story, and Susan the next day said it was a very well-rounded, great story. But after I was done putting that story together, I made a separate social media post about censorship itself. And I said, look, we just witnessed unprecedented censorship across the social media monopoly, her being censored. That's an alarming precedent that was just set.
So this was like a turning point moment for you.
That was a turning point for me.
This,
yeah,
Dr. Stella. Yeah.
What became a turning point was how Fox reacted. Fox came at my throat for standing up against censorship.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think they did that? Why do you think they came at you so hard?
Here's the thing, from the inside, yes, there's a narrative. Yes, it is unspoken, but if you accidentally step outside the narrative, if you don't sense what that narrative is and go with it, there will be grave consequences for you. And this story with Dr. Verone is what proves that.
That's a great question, and the answer is yes. We have used it. I mean, we know that it's a drug that has been politicized up to the wazoo. We've used it. We use it with good success.
I asked that question because I was getting those tips from the viewers, and that was a story, by the way, that Susan and Lee sent me there to cover the COVID treatments at that hospital. I just wasn't supposed to ask that question.
To cease and desist posting about hydroxychloroquine. In my opinion, you failed as a reporter to not know more if you were going to post about hydroxychloroquine, that you didn't look it up and look at the latest post, the latest research about it. Read the articles, read the study. There was a major study in the New England Journal of Medicine on July 23rd before that doctor, went viral. I mean, you didn't refer to any of that.
That study makes him more newsworthy. I was aware of that study, which is why I posted him.
What study?
Because
study?
I referenced it in my story about Dr. Emanuel. She's shutting down a news story that's actually happening, and that's just one of many news stories. Many stories have been shut down over the past almost a year, and I have never to this day advocated for that drug. But Fox said, you've got to stop being a bias. This is the opposite of catering to the audience. The audience was craving answers, and then they're seeing that the news is not covering it at all. Does that build trust in the news? No, that alienates the viewers. They are left to just assume the news must be in on some sort of conspiracy because they're not answering our questions on what's really going on.
When Hecker felt she was being targeted for simply trying to report the news, this motivated her to secretly record her supervisors, Vice President and News Director Susan Schiller and Assistant News Director Lee Meyer.
Everything's going to be under the microscope. You're not posting anything without Susan or I signing off on it.
Industry executives who are the people who hire us and keep us employed. That's the part that needs to make a difference to you. It's not just about the viewers, it's about what our CEO reads. It's about what our GM reads.
It's not just about the viewers, it's about what our CEO reads, it's about what our GM is general manager. What does that mean to you?
That means that corporate values are above the viewer's interests. So in journalism school, we are taught your first loyalty is to the citizen. That right there is saying we don't abide by journalism, we abide by corporate values.
It appears Hecker wasn't alone, and when our undercover journalists caught up with Hecker's Houston Fox 26 crew, they weren't shy about the bias they also felt existed at the network.
You're at Fox 26?
Yeah.
How come you guys are like the all vaccine all the time channel?
We hire producers, which are the ones that write the show, that are right out of college, about 25 years old. They don't pay them squat. They just regurgitate what they're fed. And so that's how it ends up being that. It's low-hanging fruit.
It's not like this top-down.
No. It's low-hanging fruit. They're doing vaccines across town. Well, let's go get video of that. And at first, it's like, yeah, it's a big deal. When the vaccine first comes out, here 3 months later, it's like, okay, we know vaccines are available.
Right, and they're just pushing it so hard, and you don't hear anything about side effects.
No.
The vaccine seems to be working great for most people, okay? But the fact that they are choosing to avoid any negative press about it, they're not going and looking at viewers' legitimate concerns and really
looking to get answers. If you want to get vaccinated, that's great. If you don't want to get vaccinated, that's your personal choice. But to use the venue of news to try to convince you to do something with your life. That was the journalism school's definition of propaganda.
But every commercial now has got COVID. Every other one. Every other. So how does that work? Who buys that space? We're in the time business. CDC?
Yeah. And I think about and this is with any station. I'm not just going to say Fox 26.
Yeah, no, everybody.
ABC, KRC.
I just watch TV. I just see it all day, every day.
The whole time it's like, let's be safe with it.
But how much money are they spending to do that, though? It's a ridiculous amount of money.
Yeah, they're spending money. They're spending money because they can.
CDC.
You know, yeah, they can. They in the pocket. You know, they're there.
They got my tax.
Do they pay more, though, to get all that time?
Yeah.
They do? Like, so they would pay more to Mercedes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And then the thing about it, you never imagine the clients that fight over positions to get into something.
But they take all the positions.
They're like, all right, I'll pay y'all this. This is almost like a gamble.
A bidding war. It becomes a bidding war.
Yeah, it's a bidding war. So if you
and
know
who
what?
wins the bidding war?
The highest motherfucking player.
And who's the highest motherfucking player?
Whoever wanna take it.
Vaccines are a potential money maker for Fox. I mean, that's some advertising. The vaccines, they need to be advertised somewhere. They can be advertised on Fox. Fox gets paid for that. So you've got to, as a viewer, you've got to look at who is advertising on this TV station, and you've got to realize that surely this TV station doesn't want to hurt its advertisers.
When Hecker's Fox 26 colleagues were asked if Fox 26 would ever adjust news coverage based on its advertisers, even they admit, quote, a lot of stuff can happen, unquote.
So could the ad council call you and be like, hey, I want to run all these spots, but I want to make sure your journalists aren't running any anti-vax stories. If that happens, it's above our knowledge. You won't know about it? What about you?
That's above me.
Would you hear? Do you think you'd hear about it?
Oh, that happened? Oh, I'm so sad to hear that. It goes, there's a hierarchy in a tree.
But does stuff like that ever happen?
It can. A lot of stuff can happen.
I looked up the ad council, and some of their biggest donors are the vaccine companies. So another one of their biggest donors is Fox Corp. So ad council would be paying Fox after Fox gave a tax-deductible donation to ad council. What's particularly concerning about the ad council posts is they don't come off as ads. It's not blatant that it's an ad, and it's actually paid advertising. So it's a little deceptive.
It's not clear that it's an ad.
It's a little deceptive as far as whether it is an ad. The news does need advertisers to exist, but you always hope that if the news had to cover a story about its advertiser, that it would do it unbiasedly. But there is definitely a conflict of interest.
You mentioned about advertisers. Does the news industry need advertisers to exist?
They do. That's their primary source of funding.
Is that compatible with telling the news?
There's always that concern that the corporation might cater too much to advertising or self-censor to make sure they don't lose any advertisers.
A reasonable viewer might conclude that a local Fox reporter like Ivory might be doing this just for fame and notoriety. When asked, this is what she had to say.
And a lot of people are going to be watching this and speculating, saying things. You'll even have some critics. My question is very simple. Why are you doing this?
It affects the viewers. That's why I'm doing this. The viewers are being deceived by a carefully crafted narrative in some stories, okay? In some areas, they do fantastic journalism. For some reason, some of these stories have an incredible slant, and if you accidentally step outside it, they try to internally destroy you. As I've witnessed firsthand, that affects the viewers. That does not just affect me.
Are you afraid of doing this?
I haven't had a lot of fear about it. I'm so horrified at what the news business has stooped to. At this point, I want out of this narrative news telling. I want out of this corruption.
Corruption, that's a strong word.
I want out of the corruption. I want to tell true stories without fear of whether it fits the corporate narrative.
The corporate news paradigm is incompatible with journalism.
Absolutely. It's very sad. It's very sad.
And you're not the only person that feels this way. We have spoken to other people who may or may not do what you're doing, who work for other stations and news operations and news organizations. What is your message to those people?
You need to stand for something or fall for anything. And journalism is so important. If you look at history, it is so important to go after the stories that your viewers are craving answers to keep that loyalty to the viewers and to the truth. And if you allow yourself to be guided through a corporate narrative, to be used as a tool of corporate narrative, corporate news narrative, corporate news propaganda, whatever you want to call it, then you may very well be contributing to the problems that begin to develop in a society that develops a censored press.
Ivory Hecker is ready to pursue a career in independent journalism where she can report the news without fear or favor. If you work in media and see corruption, email us at veritastips@protonmail.com.